I'm Sarah Burke, and this is the Women in Media podcast. I'm excited to catch up with a colleague from university and college today, Riley Nimens. I've run into maybe once or twice here in Toronto in the media scene. She is a multi-award winning creative and dynamic media professional. She is a producer on so many projects that we're going to talk about today, and it's nice to see you. How's it going?
It's lovely to see you too. It's so nice to catch up, and I can't believe it's been a minute since university. So,
If I have this right, you graduated from the television broadcast program at Fanshawe that was in conjunction with Western, right?
yes, good memory.
And I do remember being sort of like mouth on the floor about all the projects that you had been involved with since we graduated. We both graduated the same year, 2010. So because this is sort of like a media profile on you, what happened coming out of university? What were your hopes and dreams for the media industry and where your career would take you? And then we'll get to what you've been working on since then.
Yeah, well, with our program coming right out of school, I had an internship. I don't remember if your stream had an internship,
Yeah, we did. We did.
but I got mine at CTV News.
Okay.
And I was really lucky. I got to work in the Toronto bureau. So at the time, that was helping reporters like Lisa LaFlemme, who was the anchor and is now gone, but working with them to help them gather footage for their stories, go out and do interviews with them, and did an internship there. Absolutely loved it. And as they head into the summer, they need freelancers to backfill and to help out while people take vacation. So I said to them, I was like, I would love to do anything. And the G20 was coming up in Toronto that summer. I don't know if you remember, but the G20 in Toronto, the city was on fire,
Yes.
like cop cars and everything. But they said, we need a coffee girl, we need a runner if you just want to go get us food. And I was like, great, this sounds fantastic. Right out of school, sounds lovely. And I ended up running around the entire city because the entire crew and the team got arrested. And I immediately jumped from food runner girl to field producer to then getting hired at CTV after that. So,
First summer, team is arrested.
yes, first assignment ever in the field.
This is a great start. So you were not arrested. Were you like one of the only people on the outside helping the team that was arrested?
Yes. So I would have to go to the jail at the time because it was the jail was at a movie theater on
Okay.
Lakeshore. And our whole team was there. So we had to go bail them out. And then other people were getting arrested. And I just remember it was Lisa LaFlemme, myself, and our cameraman running around the city. You still have a deadline because the
Yeah.
news is on, and making our deadlines, doing live hits. It was a wild experience. And I remember the next week, the executives called me into their room and were like, "You can handle that. I think we can throw a couple more things at you." So that was the start of my journey in the professional world right out of school. So
Great resume building.
yeah.
How was it working with Lisa LaFlemme? Like, were you close enough to get to spend some time with her, or were you kind of on the outside?
Yeah, we worked together. I can't say enough nice things about her. She's a fantastic mentor. She hugely supports women in journalism and is just a fantastic, fun, loving, amazing woman to work with.
So this is kind of like on the news side of things, but you've worked on so many projects since then, producing sort of in live environments, sports. So walk me through a couple of the gigs that came after and what you enjoyed.
Yeah. So after the G20, I worked at CTV for a couple years. And then I transitioned to the show Daily Planet on Discovery Channel, working with Zaya Tong, who has been on the show as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Awesome.
She's fantastic. So I worked there. Science and tech hasn't always been my strong suit. So it really pushed me out of my comfort zone to think a different way about communicating that information to an audience.
Yeah.
But it also prepared me so much in the industry because we got to do so much. You got to go traveling across North America and go to all these trade shows and test tech and feed it back to the show that night. And then after that, I went and worked at CTV's Your Morning. I was one of the first producers on that show when they were making the switch from Canada AM and starting Your Morning. I helped start up that show. And then went freelance for a little bit and then ultimately ended up at W5 doing investigations, working with Avery Haynes. And That was a fantastic experience. And then I decided to go freelance again. And that's really when I've transitioned more from television broadcast to live events and sports and been offered some amazing opportunities in the last few years.
Okay, I need to stop you for a second here. So, Avery Haynes, do I have that right? That's Emily Haynes' sister
Yes.
from
Yeah.
Metric.
Yes.
I remember hearing she worked at W5. That's so cool. What a talented family, hey?
They're fantastic. And Avery is insane in the best possible way. So,
Yeah. So, in making this decision to work freelance, because this is something I've also personally gone through, walk me through what's going on in your head, what the pros and cons are when you're making that decision, because you switch back and forth and go ultimately ending up freelance again.
mhm. I think the first time I did it after leaving Your Morning, I just, at the time, the role at Your Morning, it wasn't for me and I wasn't enjoying it. And I really needed, my dad is an entrepreneur and we had a lot of conversations about trying to go freelance and being your own boss and the hustle that comes with that, but also the amazing benefits that come with it. And so I went freelance at that time and it was great, but it was really challenging. Just as a first time freelancer, I was still building my network and exploring a different genre of television. I was doing a lot of true crime at the time, which was
Yeah.
totally different than, and I'd always done news or daily content.
Yeah.
So that was a new transition. It was great. And I'm back freelance again. But at that time, I was doing very different content than what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense. So in the live events world, first gig, what was it?
the FIFA World Cup in Qatar.
No big deal.
I had the luckiest, the most amazing opportunity. A friend was working in Qatar. I had just lost my job at the time. So I left W5, went and worked at a startup for a little bit. And ultimately, that didn't work out, and I had lost my job. And I was starting the process of going, okay, I'm back in the freelance world. What do I want to
Yeah.
do? And she said, well, if you're free for a couple months, do you want to come to Qatar? And I was, I'm no
Pardon?
say nobody would say no to that opportunity. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what's it like embedding yourself in another culture like that while working on, programming essentially that's still going back home?
So the FIFA World Cup was a total different setup than anything I've ever done. I've done live television before, but
Yeah.
what we did at FIFA was the in stadium entertainment. So the moment you walk into a sports game, the MC in the arena, the any graphics you see on screen, LED boards around the stadium to promote different
Okay.
things. So it's a live show, but it's a different type of live show.
Yeah.
FIFA at the World Cup, at least, they had a 3 hour live show. So gates open 3 hours before kickoff. And so you have a bunch of different sponsored things to get done. You have to read out the starting lineup. There's a lot of formal things.
Yeah. And you got a whole team of like talent to help you with it.
Yeah, and there's an English presenter because we were in Qatar. There was an Arabic presenter. There was an MC, and so you're managing all these people to make sure that they hit their cues when they're
Yeah.
supposed to, as well as you get the Visa sponsored ad out and
Yeah.
everything when you need to. So it was a different type of live show, but it was, you feed off the energy of the 90,000 fans that are coming in to get hyped and
Yeah.
enjoy, and they're just excited for soccer. So,
In that environment, things can go wrong really fast. And there's so much dependent on like the timeline and the cues. Any stories that you can share about like having to make a decision flying by the seat of your pants?
I mean, there's a lot with a 3 hour live show.
Yeah.
There's one that specifically comes to mind. The main host that I worked with, his name is Dancing Wayne. He's very popular on TikTok. Um, and he's a fellow Canadian as well. And we were working the Canada Morocco game, and we were doing the pre-hype, um, hyping fans up. And we were in the stands with fans. And Wayne is a larger than life personality,
Okay.
and he's a smaller guy, so he likes to go on people's shoulders and have people. He likes to have people lift him up so he can just like body surf or crowd surf or get,
Okay.
and he just gets like thrown around. And he had this guy put him on his shoulders, and this guy dropped him in the
Oh
middle
my
of
God.
his pit, right on his knees on like cement concrete floor. Um, and so immediately we were like, okay, cut away from this. Let's, are you okay? What happened? And it ended up being totally fine, but just the initial reaction of seeing him go down and how to troubleshoot it and react with thousands of fans watching this and around.
The team has to be pretty tight. That's
Yes,
for sure.
yes,
Well, I hope he was okay.
he was.
That would be called like field producing, I guess, in the stadium. There were a few other sort of events like that that followed, or, walk me through some of the other live events.
Yeah, so that was really that catalyst to open the door to me doing more events. I
Yeah.
met some incredible people at that at the World Cup that I'm still in touch with daily, because we now cross over because we see each other at events a lot.
Yeah.
But that led me to I did 5 weeks in Qatar for the World Cup. And then the next month I did the FIFA Club World Cup, which was in Morocco. I've been able to I did the Paris Olympics last summer and various other smaller size tournaments here and there
Yeah.
as well. Mhm.
How do you feel like working freelance versus working for an organization for events like that on the world stage? Like, it's almost like it feels like for the Olympics anyway, everything is CBC, right? Like you see, our sort of public broadcaster all over stuff, but there's so many people behind the scenes working in so many other iterations.
Yeah, there's so many this event on site in stadium role wasn't something I was even aware existed as a role. When you step back and you think about it and you're like, yes, who's doing this? There's obviously a production crew.
Yeah.
But growing up, my dream in school at Western and Fanshawe was to one day work in Olympics. And in my mind, it was okay, CBC has the rights. That's how I'll get there with Canada. I didn't think about, right, but CBC pays into the Olympic Broadcast Service, and I could get a job with the Olympic Broadcast Service. So it's more thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
It's not just broadcast. There's the in stadium stuff as well.
So what did you do for Paris? Like talk me through some of the daily tasks, projects.
So Paris was an extremely tough, demanding role. I found it was. I worked for the Olympic Broadcast Service, and the easiest way to sort of explain is that we were Netflix, and different countries would subscribe to our service. You could have CBC subscribe, and everyone
Oh.
paid for different packages. So that includes the sport package you pay for, but then if you pay X dollars more, you get the warm up feeds, or you get the beauty shots, or you get all of these other feeds.
Hmm.
And I worked on the distribution side where we would watch sports happen. And as they were going down, for example, basketball or soccer or a sport that would go into overtime, you have to watch and be like, okay, we are running heavy here. So this could go on for another 15 to 20 minutes, which would push volleyball that's supposed to start on this channel, because you can't cut into a sport late. You have to cut into a sport right at the time, because nobody wants to
Oh.
miss the first 2 minutes of their sports.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of watching different sports and tracking the progress of each athlete and the
Okay.
game or the event, and follow along with switching channels internally within OBS to allow for all of the sport to be broadcast to the world.
So on our end, like as a viewer, let's say, we might be watching CBC or CTV and seeing a sports package that you provided.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Okay. Cool. I've been so curious about how all that works behind the scenes. What you said was really tough. What was maybe a personal lesson coming out of Paris?
The biggest thing, and all of our supervisors told us before the game started, because we were really lucky that they gave us a full 2 weeks to prep and build your lineup and build your show. And they kept saying, know your sports, know what sports are happening on your day, know the rules of your sports, know what happens with overtime, different things. You have to be able to follow the puck, very Canadian
Yeah,
example,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and react.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing for me was communication, because if a sport was running long, or if a sport ended really, really early, because an athlete was injured, you don't know,
Yeah.
um, you don't want dead air. So you want to be able to seamlessly transition from one sport to the next, but the timing has to be right, and that involves a lot of communication between different
Yeah.
people in the room. So
Hmm. Do you do you think like when you were coming up in Fanshawe and Western, that's sports and knowing sports to the extent you had to for this position was ever going to be part of your career, or did it kind of come out of nowhere?
it kind of came out of nowhere. Um, it's funny. A couple weeks ago, I was talking about this, but a when I worked at Daily Planet, one of the hosts, which was pretty earlier on in my career, the one of the hosts asked me. He said, "If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing?" And I said, "Well, I always wanted to do events, and I've always wanted to work in sports." And so, fast forward 10 years, that's
Yeah.
what I'm doing now. But also, when you look back to being a student and your career, and I was just excited to be working in the industry.
Yeah,
And
same,
you
yeah.
didn't know how, or at least I didn't know how half of these jobs even existed or how to get there. So it took a long time, but we did.
Yeah. Just to like stay on the Olympic track for a sec too, you are already prepping for another Olympics.
Yeah. I remember people would say this to me. They're like, going from summer to winter is very hard because it's only really a year and a half.
Yeah,
Whereas winter to summer, you get 2.5 years to prep.
yeah.
So it feels like Paris just finished, but Milan is coming up less than 1 year away. And so Canadian athletes are working to qualify for next winter.
So you've also worked on some projects that I think, you know, they help Canadians understand other things going on in the world. Can you talk about Dear Taliban?
Yes. So I worked at W5 with Molly Thomas.
Yeah.
And after we both left W5, she had been given a grant from the Canadian government to uh, look at women and children in Afghanistan and how, under the Taliban rule, they can't go to school.
Yeah.
And so it was her and I have chatted and brainstormed about this project over dinner and coffee for months and weeks into how
Yeah.
she was going to do it. And then, because I'd been so involved in sort of the brainstorming process, she came to me one day and said, "Okay, I'm not going to Afghanistan anymore. I'm pivoting and I'm going to Pakistan, and I would love to bring you along with me."
Okay.
And so we went to Pakistan exactly a year ago right now and spent 2 weeks interviewing these amazing and inspirational women and children who have left Afghanistan and are living in limbo in Islamabad and surrounding regions,
Mm.
about how they want to go to school, or how they're creating their own school to tutor people online. And it's an amazing, amazing story.
And where can people find that now if they wanted to watch?
It's on a Canada Land podcast.
Okay.
Dear Taliban is what it's called, and it's a 3-part series.
Got it. Okay, we'll link to it in the show notes.
Mhm.
That's cool. And you're also doing some consulting with Ottawa Tourism, which is sounds like a totally different type of project for you. How does that work?
It is. A friend of mine works in the marketing department at Ottawa Tourism, and they were given a budget to produce their own Hallmark movie. They want to promote Ottawa
The
as a city,
canal.
the canal. They want to promote Ottawa as a city because so many rom-coms or Hallmark movies, as we know, are filmed in Canada and different
Mm.
different smaller towns, but they're promoted as New York, Chicago, or a small town where they've fallen in love. But almost all of them, maybe not almost all of them, but a good number are filmed in Ontario and small towns here,
I
and
don't think I knew
specifically
that.
Ottawa. There's a ton of Hallmark movies filmed in Ottawa. So they wanted to create a short film to highlight Ottawa as a city. So there was a love story of a Hallmark movie, but it was also a love letter to the city. Wanted to show the
Yeah.
city in its amazing glory with the snow, with Parliament, with the canal and stuff. Hmm.
I can see the romance in that.
Yeah.
I actually I went to school in Ottawa for a minute. Carleton, yeah, before my Western.
I
I
was going
ended
to
up
say, because you ended up at Western. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I did the journalism program, and by like the turkey dump long weekend, I was like, I don't know if this program is for me. Like, I wanted more hands-on, so it kind of makes sense that I ended up in that MTP program,
Mhm.
the joint degree diploma. What would you say is something you haven't been able to do yet that you really would like to do in your future?
I've been very fortunate with a lot of the roles, especially in the last 2 years going
Yeah.
freelance. I would love to start up my own production company. I think one day I'm really just dabbling in being a self proprietor and self employed, just myself. But I would love to take on a mini series or a true documentary and like really see it through from beginning to end as my baby and then
Yeah.
grow it into something more.
Yeah, where you get to be involved from the beginning to the end on something versus like coming in being like, I'm freelance and I can do this.
Mhm. Exactly. No,
That
there was a project that I worked on at W5, and it's called Broken, and it was an investigative look at gymnastics across Canada. Um, and I heard the pitch for it because we used to have yearly pitch meetings, and someone from TSN brought it to us. And I immediately went to my bosses and I was like, you need to put me on this project, and here's why. And it was amazing to see it through, but I also feel like I jumped in a year into it.
yeah,
I
that's
wanted
fair.
to start it earlier, but it was great.
Can I link to that in the show notes too? Can we find that W5 series? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Crave right now. So,
Okay. Okay. So that was called Broken the Toxic Culture of Canadian Gymnastics.
yes.
And we should just throw in a little nod that it did win a CSA for Best Documentary.
Yes. No,
Congrats to the team.
thank you. We had an amazing team, and it was a journey putting that together during COVID as well. So
Oh,
interviewing
man.
former gymnasts across the country, and getting them to trust you with their personal stories of abuse and
Ugh,
heartache growing up through sport. So,
yeah. So I'm just gonna like prep you for this. I'm gonna ask you about a couple women that you admire in the media that you would maybe sort of nominate to come on this podcast and share their stories. So think on that for a second. But I think especially because we graduated from the same program and just the media industry has changed so much since 2010 when we stepped foot out of university and was like, okay, world, let's, get a job. So I'm wondering what you think is next for this industry and if there's, something that you think needs to happen for it to survive.
yeah, that's a loaded question.
I know. Or how do we save it basically?
Yeah, it's tough because
Yeah.
my background is very strongly in news and growing
Yeah.
up in a 24-hour news cycle and seeing and so much happens, but with the advancement of so many different forms of social media, nobody's watching the news. I can't tell you how many times I listen to my friends say, "Oh, I don't watch the news anymore. I just get it
Yeah.
in another way." Um, I still watch the news all the time,
I
but
do too. Like I like putting it on before bed, not because I'm like depressed, but because just like to be in the know generally on a wide variety of topics, I feel like is important.
100%. I do the
Yeah.
exact same thing when I'm getting up and brushing my teeth. I have the news on in the background just as I'm getting ready because I want to know
Yeah.
what's going on for the day. It's so interesting because everything is being shrunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
A newscast used to require however many dozens of people, and you can do it with a very small team now. Um, so news is very challenging, but there's always a need for content. And
Hmm.
whether that is through sports or Netflix or Prime or Crave or your cable or what people want to consume, it's just how that's going to change and adapt and budgets to go along with it.
Yeah.
Uh, because as well, like when we went to Pakistan, the primary reason we were there was for a podcast, but I shot bits of video on my cell phone, and we use a program called Filmic Pro, and there's a lot it was like shooting a mini documentary
Yeah.
for news articles on a cell phone.
Yeah.
Whereas flashback even 5 years, 10 years, you're bringing lights, camera, tripods, batteries, this and that with the cameraman to set up a shot. Whereas now it's very run and gun because
Yeah.
things happen so quickly. So
I'm remembering like signing out equipment at Fanshawe. Remember? So
yeah, like everyone would just like gather a load, take it to the car to then go to a shoot
yeah.
because there was so much stuff we had to rent and bring back and turn it around. But it's amazing in the sense that we're all so connected now
Yeah.
as a global society, but that has come at a cost with a lot of
Yeah.
access, like people's jobs, and the media industry is shrinking. So
It also makes so much sense that you're freelance again while this is happening, because instead of like, there's a downside, of course, but like instead of hiring people all year round to hold certain positions, they're hiring as needed. But that's where you come in and you're like, I'm available, let's go. Right. So
very much so.
super interesting hearing about your career. Is there anything else that you want people to know that we might not know about you?
I wear many hats, as we explained. I also have my own business with my sister where we put on events. This is not to do with media. We put
Okay.
on events for kids in dance competitions around the province.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, I read about this.
and so we are entering our biggest year yet with dance comps. But it's starting our own business has been the biggest challenge and yet the most rewarding at the same
Okay.
time. But it's sort of a bit different from everything I've done. But long story short, it looks at how media is shrinking and changing. I've really worked as a freelancer to diversify my portfolio so that I can do and handle anything that comes my way, essentially.
I love that. So it's called Runway Dance Connection, by the
Yes.
way. And yeah, if you're a dance mom,
We rent the
yeah.
theater, we rent the space, we've designed our own awards, we hire our own staff, we bring everyone in. And as a producer, I run a very tight ship in terms of the schedule and what's supposed to happen.
Where were you when I was in dance comps growing up? Did you dance growing up? Because I totally did.
Yes, danced all around the GTA and figure skated as well. So
Before we wrap, what was your dance studio that you competed with?
AB Dance in Markham.
Oh, yeah. Mine was called Brandy Rose, and then it switched to Fabulous Feet. I don't know.
Okay,
Do
I've
you
heard.
remember that?
It's funny to think back on this time because
Yeah.
dance, it's there's not a lot of governing body in terms of controlling dance.
So
Um,
true.
so anyone can come in and start their own thing, essentially, which is what my sister and I have done. She's a professional dancer, so we
Okay.
bring in the best of both of us for the business
Yeah.
to build it up. So yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, so the last question. Name drop a couple women you admire who you think have a lot more to share here on the Women in Media podcast.
I 100% think you should have Avery Haynes on. Her stories would be phenomenal. So she's got a couple different documentaries going on. Molly Thomas, who I went to Pakistan with, former W5 as well, but she is now hosting Big If True on TVO.
Okay.
And so she's fantastic. And then as well as someone who's a personal mentor to myself over the years. Her name is Denise Kimmel. She is leading Global's politics show in Ottawa, but she
Cool.
has helped me. She was my boss when I was an intern and
Okay.
guided me through G20. And then we worked together at Daily Planet. And then we worked together at W5. So
You literally bailed her out. Let's not forget.
I literally did bail her out. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll have all the information about Riley Nimens in the show notes, and we'll keep an eye on everything you're working on.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely.